Hi, folks. You are all welcome today, this afternoon, as we celebrate the most important day on Ireland's cultural calendar. 16th of June is actually the day we celebrate Leopold Bloom's iconic ramble around Dublin, the opportunity Joyce had to map the city so beautifully and so accurately in all its lights and darkness. There can be no doubt that today we celebrate James Joyce's great talent and his citizens also. Undeniable, Irish citizens were the responsible for enhancing Irish culture while they helped to ensure Joyce's immortality. Joyce is very clear when in Ulysses he says, I've put in so many enigmas and puzzles that it will keep the professors busy for centuries, arguing over what I meant. And that's the only way of ensuring one's immortality. So let's celebrate this immortal gift, not only for Irish literature, but also for the world literature. I'm delighted to welcome a few guest speakers today who will continue to provide opportunity to disseminate Irish culture and Irish literature here in Brazil, particularly in Bahia, and abroad. I thank you all in advance for all you have done to make today a special occasion. Before moving to the talks, I wanted to apologize for the problem with the audio yesterday. So I'm very sorry. I know that a few people wanted to make questions in the end. So if I have the time, I can open for questions about yesterday's presentations and today's presentations. Otherwise, you can send us your questions and you try to send the answers back. Now we have the first guest speaker. His name is Claudio Quintino Crow. He's an independent researcher, an author focused on Celtic and Irish history and mythology, with a keen interest on Irish music and literature. Claudio, it's your turn now. Welcome.
Thanks very much, Noélia. Thank you. It's an honor and a privilege for me, as I always say, to be part of such a wonderful project, and especially when we are, as we were discussing before, it was so many things that we've been through together, me and Noélia, since the 90s, right? So most of you weren't even born back then. So my idea is to bring a bit of my own approach to Celtic and Irish culture to the work of James Joyce. Of course, you all know that Joyce, when he wrote Ulysses, he was combining and downsizing the big, gigantic work in Greek literature, Greek mythology, to a day in an ordinary man's life. So I wanted to go the other way around and bring a bit of the mythological aspect to it, especially as you see by the title of this presentation here. I don't want to talk about Dublin as a stage where things happen, but as a character, as a soul, as a living soul, as a living entity. And I start this with saying congratulations to the lads that did, yeah.
Your presentation is not. Can you please share again, because it's not here anymore.
Oh, okay. I will indeed. Wait a minute. Okay. So as I was saying, something went wrong. Yes, it says here. So going back to StreamYard, as I was saying, the whole idea of Joyce's Ulysses is to talk about the mythological aspects of life in general, but downsized to an ordinary man's day, right? And as I said, I want to bring this the other way around and talk about Dublin as a character, as a living being that interacts with the main characters, Leopold and Daedalus and everyone, in a meaningful way. So yeah, I think I have the share screen now. Is it working, Sanio?
Let me see if it's going to show here.
I think Sanio. Are you okay, Sanio? Are you following him?
Yeah, but I need him to share the screen. It's not here yet.
It says here, not yet.
No.
That would be a nuisance. Technicalities. Here we go.
No problem.
Aha. Is it working now?
Not yet.
Okay. So hold on a second. Let's see what we tested. It was so good. Now it says here it's okay. Okay, having trouble connecting. I'm starting again. Would you like to invert this, Noélia, for us to save some time while I fix this trouble here? What do you think?
No, it's okay. Do you think it takes longer? No. Oh, in fact, I cannot listen.
I don't know.
I cannot
it says it. Oh, okay. Share screen. Okay, here we go again.
There you go. Yes, now it's on.
Okay, finally, yes. Good. Thanks for the patience.
No, no problem. No worries. I think it's plenty of time. Yes, yes.
Okay, good. So that's our subject for today. Good old Dublin, Baleach Clear, as they say in Irish. It's a lovely 1.5 million inhabitants town. I wouldn't call it a city to Brazilian standards, especially because I live in São Paulo. But still, that's the main stage for the whole plot of Ulysses. That's but not just that. As I said, my main idea here is to just a second. Where is the? Oh, here it is. Okay. It's better now. Better. Yeah, we can see Dublin. Someone wrote there. Much better.
Yeah, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay, good. And so that's the Liffey. That's the center. That's the Connell Bridge. If you're familiar with Dublin, that's where everything happens in terms of Ulysses. And I'm including here a map of Dublin from above. Of course, it's a map, and you see that the Liffey cuts the city in two halves. One north, one south, bitter rivalry between the two sides. And there's the canals, built by the British back then. But basically you have two Dublins, north and south, and Ulysses takes place in both sides of the Liffey. And the Liffey, that's where we start. Because I don't know if you remember, right in the beginning, it's the first chapter of Joyce's Ulysses. You have the old woman that comes there at the Martello Tower selling milk, right? And when she arrives, there's the description here. She arrives very humbly. Mulligan says, "Come on, man, come in, man." And she says, "That's a lovely morning, sir." She said, "Glory be to God." To whom? And I love the idea. Oh yeah, the collector of prepuces. That's how he describes God. So that's Joyce making a tirade against Jehovah, right? But the most important thing here is this. I beg your pardon now for reading this, you know. He watched her pour into the measure and thence into the jug rich white milk, not hers. So the milk isn't hers. Old shrunken paps. So she's an old woman. Of course, she has old shrunken paps, but she's selling milk nonetheless. And milk being the most vital source of life is connected to the maintenance of life. But she's an old woman. She's the Jean van Vogt, and that's the name of a period of a magazine of the period before Joyce wrote. It ran from 1896 to 1899, and it was a very nationalistic magazine created by two poets from Belfast, Alice Milligan and Anna Johnston. And the name Jean van Vogt means the poor old woman. So Joyce is making a reference there to this nationalistic magazine. No, both of them, the magazine and Joyce, an older theme. It's a mythological theme found in Irish mythology, such as, for example, this extract from Irish women's writing and traditions from, you know, the Field Day Anthology of Irish Writing, volume 4. This is a very old one, in which they have a transcription of an old tale in which Fergus and Neil of the Nine Hostages, which is a mythological character, they're traveling around and they're thirsty, and they, you know, Neil sends a lad to go and find a source, some fountain, a well. And then he arrives there and sees this ugly old lady, this ugly hag, disgusting teeth and darkened skin and everything. And she's the guardian of the well. And she says, "Well, I need water." And she said, "Well, I can give you water if you kiss me." And they say, "Oh no, I would rather die than kiss a disgraceful old woman like you are, an old, you know." And then he goes back, and of course Neil goes there. Neil of the Nine Hostages was going to be a king of all Ireland, and he arrives there, and the same dialogue goes on, and he says, "Not only will I kiss you, well, I will embrace and make love to you." And when they finish the kiss and the embrace with Neil and the old lady, the old hag, she had been turned into a gorgeous girl, one of the gorgeous girls you could ever imagine. And then he says, "Well, you have several forms." And she says, I do indeed. And who are you?" And she answers, "I am sovereignty." So that's a key point to our talk today. The old woman, the one that has sagging paps, as Joyce says, is the one that gives milk, is the one that nurtures, is the one that presents the kingship, right? So she's sovereignty. There is a nice representation of this old woman as the source of life, and you can see the image here. It's a new image, so you can see the old woman, and there is water pouring from her hands, and she's the Carla Barra, the old hag from the Beara Peninsula in County Kerry. So water flowing as source of life, right? Water flowing, if we go back to Dublin, is the Liffey. And the Liffey River has its name, it owes its name to a goddess, an Irish goddess, a Celtic goddess called Lifia. That's the name of her. That's the name of the goddess. So Avon Lifia means the river of Lifia, the river of the goddess Lifia, became Avon is river in Irish. So Avon Lifia, the goddess Lifia river that cuts Dublin into halves, as we saw, became Annalivia, Annalivia pluribel, the most beautiful. So you see the transformation from the source of life, the old woman that turns into the most gorgeous girl, Annalivia. We're talking about Finnegan's Wake, but this is still Joyce's universe, right? And there are two main representations I'd like to draw your attention to when it comes to the Liffey being portrayed as a goddess. One is this carving that can be found on the customs house, but you can see there in the center of the picture, that's the Liffey and the customs house. And there is this face, this carved face, and that's the spirit of the river Liffey, okay? That's Annalivia, that's Annalivia. And there is another one. If you go to Dublin today and you go north to Phoenix Park, you'll see there this image of Annalivia, Annalivia, which is a woman lying, sort of floating on a pond of water, right? I don't think it looks very comfortable because she's got her legs there and she's reclining, so it's like she's doing push-ups or something like that. So it doesn't look comfortable. That's a strange sculpture, I'd say. I had to go back to my old pictures from '96, the first time I went to Ireland, and I found this one that I took back then, and it's on O'Connell Street, almost in front of the GPO, and that's where she stood, Annalivia, right? The sculpture of the spirit of the Liffey. And you can see there that she's reclining, and there is water flowing through her. And the Irish, being the Irish, they would bring shampoo and empty the shampoo bottle in the water, and it would foam, and they would call her, forgive my French, the floozy in the jacuzzi, right? So that's how they treated her goddess, as a floozy, as a tart. So that's Dublin for you, right? They make jokes all the time with themselves. But the main point here is that they knew and they understood that the Liffey was a goddess. They kept that. And that's nothing new in Celtic thought, in Irish thought, because you've probably read about or heard about the Battle of the Boyne and the Boyne Valley and all the things that take place there. Well, the Boyne River itself, I'm waiting for this slide, come on. The Boyne River owes its name to a former goddess, a Celtic goddess, the goddess Boyne, right? So the River Boyne takes its name from a goddess that was part of the. Is it moving there for you? The slides? I don't think it is. Is it? No. I'll check the connection again.
No, the connection. I think the connection is okay, isn't it?
Is it? Because something's is not moving there. I should have moved.
Oh, your slide is still the same.
Yeah, exactly. Let's see if I can find it here. Just a second. Yeah, I was dropped by StreamYard. I'll try again. So bear in mind, we are talking about nothing new. On the final stroll here in our presentation. Is nothing new in Celtic thought to have rivers personifying or rivers being seen as the embodiments of a goddess, right? So Liffey, the river, is the goddess Liffia, as much as oh yeah, here we go. I found it here. Share. Here we go. Come on. As much as the River Boyne is the body or the physical manifestation of the Celtic goddess Boan. Boan is the name of this goddess. Here we go. Share again. Shared already?
No, not yet.
Not yet.
Coming.
Hopefully.
Cadê a Guinness, cara?
All right. No slides yet?
Not yet. Still,
I'm sorry for that. I deeply apologize.
no. No problem.
Yeah, strange this is. Anyway, I'll try and move on. If we happen to have the image again, all the better, because it would be like, you know, giving you a visual aid and a visual understanding of what I'm trying to convey here, you know, the main idea. But the River Boyne was a goddess. The River Liffey is a goddess. The River Shannon was a goddess, so much so that it became a popular name for a girl, Shannon, right? So all the rivers in the Celtic past, not only in Ireland but also in Britain and in the mainland of Europe, they were like the personification of goddesses, Celtic goddesses. So that brings us to the point in which we have to think about, okay, so if Dublin has to have a spirit, it has to be connected to the Liffey River, and that has to do with the fact that Joyce, whenever he wrote about his wanderings about in Dublin, he crossed the bridges all the time, to and fro, connecting the two sides, meaning he's exploring the landscape. He is exploring the possibilities of connecting the two sides, both the physical and the spiritual side of Dublin. And we mentioned here right in the beginning of the book, the first female character that appears is the old woman selling milk. She's an anonymous old woman selling milk, and we saw the connection between old women in Celtic myth and life-giving activities, right? Now, towards the end of the book, the last chapter deals with Molly Bloom, Leopold's wife. That's her famous soliloquy. And Molly is described as a very dominant character, a bit frustrated, yes, a bit, how can I put it? Sometimes lascivious, and you got a picture, you've read it, you've been there. So Molly Bloom in the 2003 movie Bloom is portrayed by the gorgeous actress Angeline Ball, and she does a very nice rendition of the soliloquy, and I think it's important to remember that that's nothing new in terms of Celtic mythology, you know, to think about how oh, wait a minute, yeah, it's okay, it's working here, how a female character is powerful, is commanding and independent, right? So Molly Bloom is quintessentially a Celtic woman, in that she's independent, in that she has her own wills and everything. And that reminds me very much of a queen from Celtic myth called Queen Maeve. She's normally associated with Maeve of Connacht, right? But she's her myth is spread all around Ireland, not just in Connacht. And Queen Maeve is described as a very independent and fierce woman, so much so that she has several husbands throughout her narrative, her life, as if you can call a goddess having a life. And she was never subject to a man, right? She was very independent, very much like Molly Bloom, even though she is a bit bitter and everything, but her soul is not doesn't submit. She's independent. She keeps her soul independent, even though in her ramblings and in her mind. And Queen Maeve is portrayed in a statue. I'm trying to go back here because I really want to be able to show you this image of Queen Maeve. This is a statue in Dublin. I know it's off there. I don't think I will be able to, but I can send you the pictures later on if you wish. But I'm trying hard here as I talk to reconnect. And Queen Maeve is part of the Táin Bó Cúailnge, which is the main saga in Celtic mythology. And it's said of her that she never went to bed with a man without another one waiting in the shadows. So you get a picture how, say, promiscuous, how lascivious she was as well. And Queen Maeve fits my description. Whenever I think of Molly Bloom, I connect the two of them. She's so important in the Irish frame of mind that she was used to illustrate a note, a bill of the old one Irish pound, £1, 1 punt bill. You had the effigy of Queen Maeve there. So that's how important she is in Irish thinking. And going back to Molly Bloom, the character, she reminds me of another personification of Dublin, also called Molly, which is Molly Malone, right? Molly Malone is a song that talks about this fishmonger that sells fresh fish and fresh seafood around Dublin. And Molly Malone is a generous character, so much so that her image as a woman is, big boobs, and a very nice cleavage, very generous, because she sells food, she sustains life, very much like the old hag turned into a beautiful, gorgeous girl that I mentioned in the beginning. I think I am going back here. Let's hope for it.
You're finishing. You're finishing.
I am.
Okay.
And if we compare the two images of Molly Bloom and Molly Malone, you will see the same characteristics that you can find in all these goddesses and heroic characters, female heroic characters from the past. And that applies very much into the song Molly Malone, because the first verse is in Dublin's fair city where girls are so pretty, I first set my eyes on sweet Molly Malone. She wheeled her wheelbarrow through streets broad and narrow, crying cockles and mussels alive on a bowl. So she's now saying, I'm selling food, I'm keeping you alive. Second verse, she says, she was a fishmonger, and sure was no wonder, for so were her father and mother before. So that goes on to prove how important it is to the Irish Celtic frame of mind to honor your ancestors, to honor the ones who gave you life, and not only your father and mother, but your predecessors, right? And it's a very naive song, apparently, but it has double meanings all the time, as normally when we are talking about Irish culture in general. And the last verse, she dies of a fever, and no one could save her, and that is the end of Sweet Molly Malone. Now her ghost wheels her barrow through streets broad and narrow. So her ghost is still alive, which is a belief that she's become an immortal soul when she dies, and she becomes the soul of Ireland, the soul specifically of Dublin, that is reborn in Joyce's work as the life-giving female goddesses of the Celtic past, personified in Molly Bloom. Now, the big question and the final question I leave for you: how is Molly Bloom? How are the ancient goddesses, the life-giving goddesses, portrayed in 1904 when Joyce wrote it? Why is she bitter? Why is Molly Bloom prone to reminiscing of the times that she was adored as an artist? What is the parallel that you can establish between this character's attitude towards herself and the Irish collective attitude towards their Celtic past, especially in the early years of the 20th century? That's the question for you to ponder, and I thank you for your patience, and I apologize again for all the trouble. I'll send you the pictures later on if you ask me, okay? So, Noélia, thanks for the patience, thanks for the invitation, and I hope you appreciate it.
Oh, Claudio, thank you very much. We could stay longer listening to you. I know how much you can share mainly about this particular subject of God, goddesses. It's really very interesting. I hope
Thank you.
I have the time to go to São Paulo and be enrolled in one of your courses. I was
That will be an honor.
Yes, I was planning to do it this year because I'm on my postdoctorate with Laura Izarra.
All
but
right.
I'm here. I could not go to São Paulo because of the pandemic.
We are locked. Yeah.
But I hope in the future. I have so
Indeed.
much to learn with you.
Oh, come on.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Claudio. Let's move to our next speaker. It's Lauro Iglesias Quadrado. I was saying English, Lauro. Lauro teaches English literature at the Institute of Letras at UFBA. He has a PhD in English from Universidade Federal do Rio Grande do Sul, não é, Lauro? His research interests are modernism, sound studies, and contemporary fiction.
Yes,
Your time.
that's me. So hey, let's see. First thing, let's see if the presentation works. Sanio, I think I'm projecting the screen. Is that okay? Is it showing?
Nice, very nice.
Is it?
Yes.
Okay. Yay! Finally, it's working. So
Okay,
well,
okay.
yeah. First thing is really, I really like to thank Noélia for the invitation. So I'm a new person, let's say, in the institute. So I felt welcomed by many, professors, and Noélia is one of them. So it's the second event, and I'm not an, let's say, I don't study particularly Irish authors or Irish studies. So it's really interesting for me to be part of these events, even if they're not really my special focus of study. So thank you, Noélia. And also thank you so much to Sanio and Lara for helping us with the whole, tech apparel, because if I have some of my students watching, you know that I'm really kind of not the right person to do that. So it took me some time to find a way how to navigate, those systems. So for today, I decided to talk a little bit about the artist novel, in modernism. So as Noélia read, my mini bio, this modernism is one of the things I studied in my I have studied in my career, as a scholar in literature. And I don't know, I just decided to go to a portrait of the artist as a young man. I just had this idea, and because I was planning to talk about the education novel with my students in the novel course at UFBA. So, but there was nothing related to Irish authors, but then I just had that idea, so why not talk about Joyce? So I decided to start with this map, so I'm not talking, I don't have anything else to say about Dublin that Claudio, didn't cover with proper, knowledge. And so I'll talk a little bit about the novel, and so the novel is a portrait of the artist as a young man, right? And it was published in 1916, so actually Joyce wrote it for years and years, even more than 10 years, but it was published as a novel in the States. And I don't think I need to introduce Joyce, because I think Lara did a great job yesterday. And also, as you can see, I love this cover that I found, and unfortunately I couldn't find the artist who is behind this illustration. But remember when Lara talked about Joyce having this, he was short-sighted, people don't really know, but he was always wearing an eye patch or these goggles, and the goggles are his signature visual accessory, let's say. And I love this illustration because you have on one side let's say, the city or the town. And on the other side, you have water that can be the river, the rivers, or the sea, you know. And it's interesting visual connections to kind of imagine what the novel brings in a way, right? So if you can remember some of like Sanio's screenshots from the movies, and also with today that Claudio is bringing the images of Dublin, you kind of get a notion of why these two things are so important. This kind of conflict in a good way about what's, you know, man-made, what was built by people, and what is actually nature and water, and what's behind all that, right? So, well, my talk is a little bit on the literature theory side, let's say. So, I don't know if you've heard of those. I know we have some people who are watching who are from, who are NUPEL students. So, these terms, they're like very common in literary theory. Okay, so as I am a literature professor, I'll try to explain them briefly so it doesn't get too overwhelming for people who may not be familiar with that. So the Bildungsroman, right, that's a German term. So we can kind of summarize that as like the coming of age story, or maybe the formation years story, right? So I'm sure everyone here knows about like a movie, let's say even like Hollywood movies, that you have the story of one person that grows old and learns how to do something, or becomes a master, or becomes an artist, or becomes a musician, or becomes whatever, you know. So you kind of learn the craft, you know, so you learn some kind of skill. And this is like, in English you say that's an education, right? So you usually have a master, you have some kind of guide or a monk, or depending on the cultural background or perspective, things can get different, but I'm pretty sure you know one story like that. And I didn't want to bring examples because I want you to imagine that, and even like assess the movies you watch, or maybe the series you watch, the stories you read, and think about that. So how does the character, maybe a young character who grows older, is different if you compare like the beginning and maybe the ending or the end of the story, right? That's kind of a challenge. And so the idea kind of behind this Bildungsroman, right, is this idea of growing mature. So if you are mature, if you're a mature person, you have some kind of background that you kind of have a line that you kind of learn how to do something, and you become a more mature person, or maybe a more serious person, if you like, or an adult person, right? And there is some kind of objective background that can be challenged, especially if you're an artist, right? And how you deal with that. So we have this another German term, the Künstlerroman, right, which is literally the artist novel, right? And so this is like telling the story of one person who becomes an artist, right? And that doesn't necessarily mean you're going to be mature when you become an artist, right? So this idea of you perfecting yourself, or you improving your, I don't know, ethics or knowledge or whatever, is kind of challenged, and especially in Joyce, I believe, right, in many ways. So even if it sounds, if you have some kind of contradiction, right, if you learn something, then you know how to destroy it, right? And so who is this artist, right? Who's the artist who's the artist being portrayed? So that's Stephen Dedalus, right? And some people say Daedalus in English, and he was named after the Greek mythology character, right? So he was this kind of artist character, a skillful character. So maybe if you know the myth of Icarus, like the flight of Icarus, so Daedalus and Icarus, they created wings so they could fly and escape or do things. And if you know the story of Icarus, maybe, I don't know, it just flies so much, you know. So this is the idea that, yes, maybe if you really know how to do something, sometimes it's not that good, you know. But that's not the discussion here. So the thing is, as in everything in Joyce, you know, so you have this idea of there is always a reference, right? Or almost always a reference. And Stephen Dedalus is a clear reference to this Greek character, right? And it's so funny when you read the novel, many characters just talk about his name as being weird, right? So it's a recurrence in the novel. So people talk about, oh, that's a weird name, Dedalus. Where does that come from? That's not Irish, you know? So that's another layer of estrangement, you know? So kind of being detached. So he wants to be, Joyce creates this character that is a part of the Irish setting that he's depicting, but also a little detached, you know? He doesn't have an Irish name, but he has this Irish figure, you know? And this distance is vital for this idea of the artist, you know? So you're watching, you're observing, and not necessarily all the time learning from a master, right? But you also have this idea in the artist novel that the character grows from childhood to early adulthood, right? So he becomes an adult, and he suffered, like, bullying wasn't a thing when Joyce wrote that. But that's like an example. If you want to read about bullying, read A Portrait of the Artist of a Young Man, because Dedalus really suffered. But he also, he always had in the character this, every time there is this idea of observation, of watching how things work, right? So to finish in this idea of eagerness, right? So he wants to live life, he wants to experience things and not just being this kind of box, like person inside a box, right? And okay, so what kind of education am I talking about, right? So again, I'm sorry for not, I couldn't find the name of the photographer, but this is, I was trying to find amazing doubling pictures around Joyce's era, right? And I found a story on the Irish Times, right? So I have the link on the references. So if anyone wants the slide, you know, I can send that after the presentation. But we have this interesting idea, so we can kind of have a notion, because we saw some doubling pictures, like present day doubling. But this is kind of what doubling looked like. That is 1907, 1904, we don't know really well. And it was a town, right? It wasn't a big city. And of course, you can read the caption because it's too small, but it says that the wealthy came to the city to work, to shop, or in the evening to enjoy, you know, the nightlife. But the wealthy Irish people, the rich people, they would live in the suburbs, right? So the town itself, let's say, what would be considered the center of Dublin, let's say, was not a place that wealthy people would live. So many poor people would be around. So when you read about Joyce walking around Dublin in the Portrait of the Artist, he's actually walking around the not so wealthy, maybe middle class, lower middle class, and straight poor areas, right? And so what kind of education does he have, right? So when he was a kid in the novel, remember that you have this story, he's growing old, right? And so you have this institutional and traditional side of education. So school, church, and family. And guys, it's so relatable. If you want to read, if you think that fighting over politics over in dinner like is something new, oh man, it's just rejoice. And you see that people really, you know, got to each other's throats, and what we live right now is not new, you know. So what the expectations of family over what kind of political side you would go, what kind of religious view you should have, what kind of experience you should have. You have all of that in Joyce. And one thing that is really interesting is that the story is being told, like Stephen Dedalus is not the narrator, but everything feels, you know, under his touch. And so you have that, right? And when he gets to his teenage years, you know, his education goes beyond what school provides, right? And he has these conversations, and he starts to develop this opposition to formal institutions, right? And one thing that is really, what really, how can I say that, turned his life upside down is his first sexual encounter, right? So, guys, if you read like chapter 3 of this novel, you have like 30 pages of religious torture, right? So you have the preachers just narrating how you would be tortured for the whole of eternity if you were a sinful person, right? And it's really strong, and it really gets you. It's painful to read, especially with the whole like torture talk we have nowadays. But it really makes it stronger, right? As I said, the things we're experiencing today, they're not new, and you feel, and you read them, you read many of those things in Joyce as well. So the sexual encounter is this thing that breaks, you know, like puts Stephen Dedalus provides him, like, let's say, more to life than what school and church would provide. And then you have the ending with the early adult days, you know, it's very short. So his education is developed on observation and the direct experience of things, right? So this walking, and I love this term, like the urban derived, you know, in English people say drifting. So if you know, like Guy Debord, like he gives this methodology of just kind of walking around if you don't know, or if you know the city, and kind of get lost and experience, hear things, touch things, smell things, you know. And so this is how he experiences life. You don't need to be inside a school or be under the like tutelage of your family and parents to know about life, because there's more to life than that, right? So his discussions, his talks with his classmates and friends, that's what provides him with further education, right? So you always have this tension, right? This is important. He's not like, let's say, oh, this is garbage, I don't want to have anything to do with that. But he's like, okay, I want that and more, you know? So I want to kind of, okay, that does well for me, that does not do well for me. And also you always have the weight of something you I don't know, you have just grown like old with the whole education in formal institutions, and it's hard to get away from that. So I am quoting Moretti, right, or Moretti, he's Italian. So I really like him, and Joyce is a very interesting author to read, like together with Moretti, because he makes maps. He creates like literary cartography, right? So he creates maps. So if you want to read Joyce and follow his steps, like Moretti is an interesting name for that. So this is the book I'm quoting, Romance de Formação, right? So that's a cool book, you know. So the whole book is about the Bildungsroman, right? In Portuguese, it's o Romance de Formação, right? So he says that from the turn of the century, you know, we have some other authors like Robert Musil, Thomas Mann, and the modernist authors, you know, and they see teachers as these foolish figures, you know. So there's nothing else to teach other than the obvious tricks, you know. So there's a quote that I bring from Moretti. So youth begins to despise maturity and self-define itself in opposition to it, in opposition to being mature, right? So that idea of being mature and being wise and knowledgeable is kind of being destroyed, or if not destroyed, at least challenged by authors such as Joyce and the other names they brought. And a quote from the novel, okay, Dedalus, Stephen Dedalus says, "I will not serve," okay, because he was being picked as the one to follow the religious career and to become maybe a priest or some kind of religious figure in that school. And he said, "I will not serve." And there is a straight relation to Lucifer, okay, the fallen angel, who said, "I will not obey, I will not serve." So there is this idea. And just to give the final points, right, final observations, I was talking a little bit about modernism, right? So modernist writers, if you're not a literature, if you don't study literature, let's say it in a very poor way, let's say very broad way, authors who wrote in the beginning of 20th century, right? So, and they were like challenging ways to tell stories, and most of all, they were challenging that literature was not maybe this serious thing that people just took it for like a, let's say, a holy thing as the institutions, you know. So with modernist writers, there's this appeal to the senses and sensations. So if you read Joyce, you have like sounds, smells, and sights all the time, and this has to do with the changing of cities, right? So here you have the bridge that Claudio was talking about, you know. So Joyce would go up and down the bridges, you know. And when you build bridges, you're kind of developing on the urban scenario, developing the city. So you're just like creating this bigger area for people to get to know each other, touch each other, smell each other, you know. So it's a very rich scenario for these things to happen, right? And I'm also quoting another literary theory, like Georgi Lukács, right? And he talks about this, the transcendental homelessness. It's a beautiful thing, which is like this idea of the writer who is like, okay, maybe I don't have a home. And home, he means like the country and family and religion, you know? So like these three pillars, you know, the institutions of traditional education for, let's say, a Western European person. And when you think about that, if you don't have a home and your soul doesn't have a home, this is like, okay, I don't want to be, let's imagine, as Daedalus, he leaves Ireland at the end. So he doesn't want to be only a part of Ireland. He wants to be a part of Ireland and, you know, so this is the idea of adding and not only just cutting, right? So he doesn't want to be a part of that because it might be limiting, but also to have the experience of being a part of something else, right? And guys, this is like 10 minutes, so it's a little maybe too fast, but I have the references, so you have the link, you know, the Irish Times, if you want to follow. It's a nice little story. So, I mean, a short story, you can read that, and that's it. Thank you so much again.
Okay, Lauro, thank you very much for your contribution. I hope I can count on you next time. This is not the end. Now comes Vitor Alevato do Amaral. He teaches English language and literature at the Department of Modern Foreign Languages of the Fluminense Federal University in Niterói, Rio de Janeiro. His main area of research are Joyce studies and literary translation, with a focus on the retranslations of James Joyce's works. He's also a researcher affiliated with the research group on translation and adaptation studies, among other activities. Vitor, it's your turn now. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. Good afternoon. Good to be with you online, but somehow with you. Bloomsday is something that usually takes place out of the universities. We academics, some of us at least, have managed to bring Bloomsday into the universities, but Bloomsday, I don't think it belongs to the university, to the academic world. It should be in the pubs. It should be where people are walking up and down the streets.
Yeah.
So somehow, because of the pandemics, we're outside the universities physically again, and Bloomsday is somewhere on the line. It's good to talk about Joyce. It's good to talk about Ulysses. But my topic this afternoon is Antônio Weiss. I have a few slides I'm going to share with you. I think when I share my screen, I'm not going to see you anymore. So I'm going to ask you if you can see me or if you can see the slides. Okay. Can you see my slides?
Not yet. Oh, yes, it's coming.
Yep. It's coming. Good. It's just a few slides. The name of this presentation, which is meant to be very short, is The 1-Year Odyssey of a Ulysses Translator. I think you all can see Antônio Weiss's face here, right, on the screen. Yeah. So
Yes.
the first important thing about Antônio Weiss. I'm sorry, I had trouble here. Just a second. Okay, I'm back. The first important thing about Antônio Weiss is the pronunciation of his name. Please, not how Weiss, how Weiss. I mean, simply Weiss. This is a name of Lebanese origin, and it should be pronounced in Portuguese simply Weiss. Okay, Antônio Weiss, better known perhaps for his dictionary, Grande Dicionário Weiss da Língua Portuguesa, which is considered one of the best dictionaries of the Portuguese language, even by the Portuguese. And you know how hard it is to get the Portuguese to acknowledge that we Brazilians can do something about the Portuguese language. This is the cover of a biography of Antônio Weiss, Antônio Weiss, Uma Vida. It is a collection of short recollections and short essays from friends and family. Weiss was born in 1915 and he died in 1999. Sadly, he died before he saw his dictionary published. He died in March and the dictionary was published in, I don't remember exactly, June or July. So for a few months, he missed the publication of the dictionary. He didn't see the dictionary in print. He was a lexicographer, a diplomat, a translator, member of the Brazilian Academy of Letters. He took his chair in 1971. And last but not least, he was a gourmet. Not a gourmand, because he was very skinny, but gourmet. He was a very good cook. He would welcome guests to his apartment. He would cook for his guests at night. He would read from his translation. Then he would say goodnight and go back to his translating. He was definitely what we can call a workaholic, Antônio Weiss. As a lexicographer, we know him because of the dictionary. As a diplomat, we sometimes forget that he was a diplomat and that he represented Brazil at the United Nations, where he was a sort of mentor to third world country representatives. For this reason, in 1964, right after the military coup, the Portuguese ambassador, who was not very fond of Antônio Weiss, for sure, made some pressure, and the military government fired Antônio Weiss from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. The key element here, the triggering event here, is the fact that Antônio Weiss, as a mentor for the third world country representatives, he would vote against Portugal in the United Nations. And of course, the Portuguese ambassador did not like the idea very much in Brazil. And the Castelo Branco government would never have Antônio Weiss representing Brazil in the United Nations. So Antônio Weiss was one of the first professionals and diplomats to be out of Itamaraty. He was, as I said, member of the Brazilian Academy of Letters and president of the Brazilian Academy of Letters from 1995 to 1996. And as a gourmet, he was not only a good cook, but a good writer too. He wrote a book about beer, believe it or not, which is, of course, very Irish. This is the cover of the first translation, the first Brazilian translation and the first Portuguese language translation of Ulysses, published in 1966. This one, on the cover, you can read second edition. But the cover of the first edition was just the same, except for the inscription second edition, of course. Just out of curiosity, the flip of the second edition was written by Augusto de Campos, a orelha do livro. This is the cover of a very interesting 1983 edition of Ulysses, because it is a Portuguese one. After the 1966 translation by António Weiss, the Portuguese language had no translation of Ulysses, and for about 20 years, it was the only existing translation of Ulysses in the Portuguese language. But his translation was so competent that in 1983, the Portuguese, and this publishing house, if I'm not mistaken, let me hide something from the video here, DeFel, yes, DeFel published António Weiss's translation with, of course, orthographic adjustments, accommodations for the Portuguese readership. But this is a very interesting one. Other things I would like to say, I have some notes here, because I didn't want to forget to mention one thing about, oh, of course, yes, the fact that António Weiss translated Ulysses in less than a year. He translated Ulysses from November 1964 to October 1965. And he was very clear when he said that he not only translated the book, but also revised his own translation, because he would never trust the publishing house to say what was right or wrong in his text. So, as I said, he was a workaholic. This is just out of curiosity. In 1945, the first Spanish language translation of Ulysses was published. So over 20 years before António Weiss's translation was published in Brazil. Surprisingly, the translator of Ulysses into the Spanish language, an Argentinian, José Salas Subirات, who barely knew English language, became a myth, became very famous, and everybody knows Salas Subirát's translation. But when it comes to the Brazilian translation, who was written by a lexicographer, a philologist, a very competent person, very few people know about António Weiss, for example, in the United States or Europe, when you talk about the Ulysses translations in Portuguese. But I mean, when I travel, many people ask me, is Ulysses translated in Portuguese? Is Ulysses translated in Brazil? A very important biography of Salas Subirát was published 4 or 5 years ago in Argentina. I think it's about time we have a very good and comprehensive biography of António Weiss in Brazil too. And of course, it is perhaps surprising, but if not surprising, at least interesting to note that the first Spanish language translation of Ulysses is Argentinian, not Spanish. And the first Portuguese language translation of Ulysses is Brazilian, not Portuguese. Now, something very, a second very sad thing is related to Weiss's translation of Ulysses, Joyce's Ulysses. The first thing, of course, is the military coup and his, between quotation marks now, retirement, as the military regime would like to say, that he was retired from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, but they forget to mention that he had no sort of pension or stipend. He was penniless when he left the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. So because of that, he had to take Ulysses to translate. The publisher, the owner, in fact, of Civilização Brasileira, Enio Silveira, invited him to translate Ulysses, which he did, as I said, in less than a year, for about a minimum wage per month. This is what he got to translate Ulysses, a minimum wage per month. But he says that Ulysses somehow saved him. And this is a second very sad fact about Joyce's life. And I'm going to read this in Portuguese. Ulisses talvez não existisse se minha mãe não tivesse morrido. Nunca havia bebido uma coisinha de álcool, nunca havia fumado um cigarrinho, e, entretanto, ela morreu com uma cirrose de fígado, cujo processo é lento e doloroso. Ela sempre foi o meu amparo. Naquele momento, para mim aquilo foi muito duro, e aceitar a tarefa de Ulisses era uma maneira de poder conviver com o sofrimento, porque no momento em que eu me enterrava na tarefa, eu podia esquecer aquela doença, né, por alguns momentos. So, while he was translating Ulysses, his mother was actually dying of cirrhosis. It could have stopped him from doing this, but he said no. It was something that helped him move on, because it gave him something to do. Because out of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, he was translating and writing for newspapers, and that was where his money would come from. Now, I have, I think, 3 more slides. If we have time, Noélia, you tell me when time's up for me.
Yes. Okay, go on.
Oh, thank you. This is an interesting conversation, which was reported by Fernando Sabino in a newspaper in Jornal do Brasil, 1974. Sabino asked him, por que você traduziu stone, medida de peso usada na Inglaterra, por pedra mesmo, em português? Joyce replied, porque em português pedra é uma expressão arcaica usada como medida de peso. Fernando Sabino then asked him, he nodded, você traduziu, ele nutou. Não seria simplesmente ele concordou com a cabeça? Joyce replied, but nutar é um verbo que quer dizer concordar com a cabeça. So I think this is a very interesting, as an example of why Antonio Joyce's translation is, for some people, taken as more difficult than the original. It exemplifies Joyce's way of thinking and Joyce's method in translating. If pedra is an archaic word in Portuguese, I'm going to use it. If nutar is an archaic, or at least not so regular verb in Portuguese, I am going to use it because it exists in the language. I many times think that instead of saying that Antonio Joyce's translation is too erudite or too complex or too difficult, we could look at Joyce's translation as more foreignizing, for example, to use Laurence Venuti's expression, instead of simply saying that it is difficult. And to finish, I have one excerpt from Ulysses, Joyce's original, of course, and then the same excerpt translated by Antonio Joyce, Bernardina Pinheiro, and Galindo. So if we have 3 minutes, I can go through it.
Yes.
Just the poem. Just let's focus on the poem, which is an acrostic. You see the name Poldi. You read the name Poldi in the initials. Poets oft have sung in rhyme, of music sweet their praise divine. Let them hymn in 9 times 9. Dearer far than a song or wine. You are mine, the world is mine. So this is the poem. Now let's take a look at Joyce's translation. Poetas cantaram, não raro em rima, o doce encanto de sua divina, loas em himno de toada fina, dou eu agora a que me domina, iaiá gentil, minha vida ensina. This is a brilliant translation, translation. The use of rima with R-H-Y is an archaic form of the word rima. Hymno, H-Y-M-N-O. This is a brilliant translation, a finding by Antonio Joyce. Now, when we go to Bernardina's translation, and Bernardina was very clear when she translated Ulysses. She said she wanted to give the readers something that was still Ulysses, but a Ulysses that were more readable. She never meant to simplify Ulysses, but she wanted to give readership something that were more readable. Poetas antigos louvaram em canções os cantos da música para os corações. Louvem o que bem quiserem, pois seja como for, dizendo que mais que vinhos e canções, o mundo para mim é o teu amor. If we compare Joyce and Pinheiro, we see that something is different. First, the rhyming. Second, the metrics. If we only focus on rhyming, let us go back to the original, Joyce's original. Joyce was very clever, so much so that when you read this poem, the only word that does not rhyme is rhyme. You have divine, nine, wine, mine, rhyme. The only word not rhyming is the one that were expected to be rhyming, rhyme. Weiss keeps it. Rima, and then divina, fina, domina, sina. Then when we go to Pinheiro, canções, corações, canções. They all rhyme. And then we have a second rhyme, for amor. Last but not least, let's take a look at Galindo's translation, which I find brilliant as well, but very much different from what Weiss did. Poeta é aquele que disse, obtive sempre o que quis, lendo aos outros o que fiz, dou-te o ABC e o X, YZ também, feliz. Very clever translation. Again, disse does not rhyme with quiche, fish, sheesh, and feliz. And when we deal with a writer such as James Joyce, we need sometimes a philologist, a lexicographer, such as Antonio Weiss, someone who can rescue archaic forms of words such as rima or rimino, someone who can use the word hipocorístico, for example, where Bernardina Pinheiro uses abbreviação and Galindo also uses abbreviação. But these are differences, and the three translations are here for us to compare and to pick one to our taste, of course, to our eyes and ears. Let me go back to you. Where am I? Okay. No. Okay. Stop sharing. Thank you so much.
Okay, Vitor, thank you very much. So we have 10 minutes, still 10 minutes, Sanio. Sanio, 10 minutes.
Okay, we have some time. Yeah, we have some time.
Okay, so I introduced myself a few days ago when I did my first talk on Bloomsday. But I will say again that I have a PhD on Irish literature from the University of São Paulo, Brazil. I am a full professor for the Instituto de Letras at Federal University of Bahia, Brazil, for over 2 decades. As a member of ISIL, I have been lecturing on Irish films in conferences held in different countries. In 2010, I completed my postdoctoral research on the adaptation of Irish plays to the cinema at Leeds Metropolitan University under the supervision of Professor Dr. Lance Pettit with a grant from CAPES. I was supposed to leave, as I said before, to Claudio, to São Paulo for another postdoctoral research. So this is what I'm going to present today, is a project I haven't read enough. I haven't written enough. Just the project, which is, as I can see in the title, Island in the World in Ireland, Migration and Social Transformation in Post-Celtic Tiger in Irish Literature and Films. I think we all know, we who study Irish literature, Irish culture, the interest in Ireland and everything concerning Ireland is not something new. If you consider the number of dissertations and theses on relevant names of Irish literature, such as James Joyce, Oscar Wilde, W.B. Yeats, Bernard Shaw, Samuel Beckett, to cite only a few. Our Brazilian students or researchers have also been producing papers, books, lecturing on the work of those key figures of the Irish literary past. As most of these Irish writers lived in Ireland and abroad, researchers have investigated how they were engaged in what happened in the country and abroad from the turn of the 19th century to the middle of the 20th. That is to say, how local and global, coupled with private and public issues, are represented in their works, taking into account the different themes they embraced, such as nationalism, identity, otherness, fragmentation, among others. Students are also interested in specific themes which are very peculiar to Irish literatures, such as death, colonialism, family relations, religion, famine, sexuality, adultery, and a few others. They are explored by different playwrights, novelists, poets along the 20th century, such as Sean O'Case, Brian Friel, Marina Carr, Erin O'Brien, Kate O'Brien, to name just a few. It's evident, however, the material the Irish writers are currently producing about Ireland is not the same of James Joyce, Bernard Shaw, and the others. Time has changed the face of the country together with the face of the world. Globalization, capitalism, migration, social transformation have been the current themes Irish playwrights, novelists, poets, filmmakers are engaged. In order to form an accurate idea of the period we are just ready to see here, it's necessary to talk about the Celtic Tiger, a dramatic period in Irish history when a troubled and economically backward countries suddenly seemed to have discovered Aladdin's lamp and all its wish come true, as Fintan O'Toole states in his comments on the edition of Brian, Lucy, and others entitled Recalling Celtic Tiger 2019. Still borrowing O'Toole's idea on the period, Celtic Tiger was liberating, exhilarating, self-delusional, and ultimately disastrous, and we are still living with this dodged legacy. These years of boom and bust should be reappraised in order to see how the hugely important sea change have affected the modern Irish society, using Declan Kybag's words in his comments on the book previously mentioned. The end of the Celtic Tiger, which corresponds to the year of 2008, post-Celtic Tiger, was when the Irish economic crisis hit the country. The economic recession had its consequences in many aspects that had shaped the Irish society, from the standard of living and renewed emigration to moral and Catholic values, family and culture. The aftermath of Celtic Tiger came to coincide with the globalization process, when increasing cultural flux, circulation, and transnationalism have inspired writers, filmmakers, and intellectuals to explore the new image of the country and the new definition of Irish identity. This is the aim of the present project, that is, to question the cultural context of post-Tiger Ireland and appraise the ways artists interrogate the past and describe and represent the present. I believe the works under scrutiny will provide understanding of the impact and the influences of the economic and political fallout on the cultural production of the country. As this project addresses the puzzle of why Ireland has proven so open to emigration and immigration, and how they have affected Irish culture and identity, it was exploring the theme of migration and its different types here. Migration is a complex and worldwide phenomenon associated with globalization. Historic accounts of migration show that humanity has always been on the move. Throughout history, movements of migration have happened for different reasons: to escape persecution, war, conflict, poverty, environmental disaster, more jobs opportunity, among others. The National Geographic Society 2005 has categorized the phenomenon in many types based on the mobility of people: internal migration, external migration, emigration, immigration. It also includes return migration and seasonal migration. We must not overlook that migration of any sort is never an easy option. Leaving home, family, and friends behind always come at a painful price. Along with difficulties, migrants can also experience a new relationship, which may enable them to enrich the host countries with their professional skills, together with their social and cultural language and heritage. No doubt, migration gains its specific meaning in Irish context. Ireland had been for a long time associated with a long history of emigration rather than immigration. Many studies, research, historical and literary books, documentaries, and films were produced on particular years of Irish history marked by high waves of emigration. Besides showing how migration directly reflected in the demographic and social aspect of Irish society, these fictional and historical documents also highlight migrants' experience in the host country, the process of integration to life, how they face racism, social exclusion, language barriers, and cultural differences. Unlikely the history of immigration in Ireland, reasons why people migrate, how integration policies are made, barriers to the integration, how migration affects Irish society, and other studies on the matter are not largely explored as immigration yet. The emergence of a different island and different identities in Ireland justify the present research, considering the growing concerned with the inflow of migrants from different parts of the world in the country. Reviewing the awesome level of immigration in the 19th century, at the time of the Great Famine, 1846 to 1851, we see how a large number of the Irish population was forced to leave the country in order to survive. The reason for their exile was related to a strong disease that struck 1/3.5 of the potato crop across the country, called potato blight. The disease attacked the potato crop in different periods. The last period, from 1847 to 1848, the failures were more serious than in 1845, when the death records were very high. The disease killed more people than starvation. The majority of those who fled the abject poverty to which they had been reduced searched for different places to live, such as the United States, Great Britain, France, and Australia. Many of those who emigrated to America died on the way due to fever, as well as cramped and sanitary condition on board. So, moving now to this study, this project, I could say that it's crucial to study how the shift from the experience of emigration to a new experience of immigration has transformed Irish social horizons and identity, and how playwrights and filmmakers grasp how a monocultural and monoethnic country have changed to intercultural and interethnic country. It analyzes every selected play, its adaptation to the stage, audience reception, as well as the selected films. The aim of this research is then to investigate materials on theater and films and develop the analytical tools. So then the present study aims to find evidence for and understand the creative process that produces the selected plays and films. It also aims to better understand the experience of inward migration, ethnicity, and process of othering in a few plays and films produced in the last decades. By analyzing those experiences, we are able to recognize types of narrative, aesthetic characteristics, the intertextual positionality of the exiled, diasporic, migrant, ethnic films and plays employed by the artists in their stories. As the process of globalization has multifold effects on migrants, it will also examine how plays and films depict cultural ethnic otherness in terms of accents and stereotypes. Furthermore, the research will look at the factors constructed by Irish writers and filmmakers and producers as well, in terms of the difficulties inward migrants face. That is, the way artists represent migrants' sense of displacement, problems of integration, abuses, unfair wages, and many other social and cultural barriers. Also, to create resources for more research, debate into and wider public understanding of Irish plays and films produced after the Celtic Tiger. The research will provide quantitative and qualitative data information. I believe it will contribute to identifying the complexity of the inward migrants' living conditions in Ireland in terms of language, culture, and sense of self, and how new humanitarian policies may help to promote the integration experiences. Thank you very much. This is just, I try to shorten my project. I have written more, but time is up. I have to open for a few questions. Let's see if anybody has any question. Remember yesterday we had Gisele, we had Sanio, Lara, Fernando. So if you have any question, you can ask now. Then we move to today's questions. I think Laura said that he had a question.
Yeah, so actually yesterday, Gisele brought so many writers that I didn't know, and especially the poets. And she mentioned something about the, I'm sorry, I don't know, maybe I'm just misquoting the name, the Irish Revival or Gaelic Revival, right? And I would love to hear a little bit more about that because I don't know much. And especially because I was trying to relate that to how Joyce works and his tension with the nationalists and the anti-nationalists, let's say. And I couldn't do that because I don't really know much about this movement. And well, that's kind of basically the question I had. And also about the writers, but then I will have to know the names, but that's the general question.
Thank you, Laura. I think I missed part of your talk now, just your question because of audio issues. But I think you want to know the connection between Joyce and the writers after with the Irish Revival. Is that correct? Is that your question?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Thank you very much. In fact, the Few Day Anthology, I think, I'm not sure if Claudio or Vitor mentioned the Few Day Anthology again today, but the Few Day, the Few Day was initially a group of drama players in the 30s, and then in the 60s, 70s, and 80s, they started popping up again as to incentivize even such great publication as the Few Day Anthology of Irish Writers. But when we talk about the Irish Revival, and then I was referring yesterday to the second Irish Revival, which happened in the 1990s, I'm referring to a response both to nationalism and, in the case of the women writers, to tradition. I mentioned Celia Dufresne. Celia Dufresne is one of the leading poets today, who started writing initially in Gaelic. She won many prizes for writing in Gaelic. She wrote Blood Debts. Blood Debts was initially also in Gaelic, and then she translated. She still does that. She still writes first her books in Gaelic, and then she herself translates. There are many other writers, such as Merv McGuckian. Lucy Collin in Paraná translated a big author also, whose name now escapes my mind, but ABEI also brought, the Brazilian Association of Irish Studies, back in, I think, 10 years ago, 2010, when the symposium was held in the Federal University of Paraná in Curitiba. That author was there together with Lucy, who was her translator into Portuguese. Anne Hartigan, I quoted Anne Hartigan. And then the question related to the relationship with Joyce is that Joyce was like a founding father to contemporary literature, and together with Yeats. Yeats is recognized as one big figure in Irish poetry, and he's always, so as to say, opposed to Yeats. Yeats is always opposed to Joyce. So I would say, answering your question, what is the connection between the Irish revival poets and Joyce, is that I think the connection with language and the connection with bilingualism. As I said yesterday, Joyce and Vitor can say much more about this. Joyce was a man of the world, and I think what these authors are seeking as they translate themselves is being read around the globe, not just sticking to the island, being Irish writers, what does it mean? And we go back to Noélia's talk about the global and the local. And the famous, I forgot his name, famous journalist in Ireland who talks about global village. Ireland is a global village. Fintan O'Toole, that's the journalist's name. Anyway, I hope I have given you some idea on the relationship between Joyce and the Irish revivalist poets. Thank you.
I think it makes, thank you. I think it makes a lot of sense when you have this contradiction, that Joyce is kind of proposing also with his literature, and to have Joyce and Yeats as both figures to look up to. That makes a lot of sense. Thank you, Gisele. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Any question about Lara, Sanio?
Yeah, I would like to ask, actually, it's less of a question and more of a comment to Sanio, because I was so glad he gave us so many hints on what to watch in pandemic times. We had all those references for wonderful films. And I wanted to know how, if Sanio ever thought about the relationship between the local and the global in these films, because they are Irish productions, but also with some of them with US money. And then yesterday, Sanio compared them to Hollywood productions. And then I was wondering, for example, how different the films Sanio mentioned yesterday and films such as The Madeleine Sisters. I think it's The Madeleine Sisters, which is the adaptation of the novel about the Madeleine Sisters. That I can say, that is very Irish. In terms of story, in terms of adaptation, localism. So I'm not sure if Sanio had given some thought on that, and if we can still think about Irish films as Irish, or is there such thing, or just some reflection upon Sanio's talk. Thank you.
Okay, Sanio.
I think Vitor wanted to say something before.
I need to say that I have a university meeting, collegiate meeting, reunião de colegiado, which just started 10 minutes ago, because they're going to deal with very sensitive, difficult issues for us these days. I cannot see it, but I can stay, let's say, for 5 more minutes here if you have something to say about my presentation. Otherwise, I will have to say that it was lovely meeting you.
Oh, no problem. No worries, Vitor. Any question for Vitor before moving to Sanio? So, if there is no question, you are free, Vitor, to
you who work in public institutions know that colegiado is colegiado. I have to go there.
All right.
It was great. It was great to meet you here and
for your
participate.
contribution. And
I thank you so much. Thank you. Nice seeing you.
Okay. Bye-bye. Moving to Sanio now.
Okay. Well, I have thought about that. Actually, my dissertation was related to that, to the influence of other nations, of other cultures in Irish cinema. But I think that nowadays it seems that Screen Ireland wants the films to be more commercial. And it was very interesting that you mentioned the Madeleine Sisters, because one of the films that I mentioned, The Devil's Doorway, it's about the Madeleine Sisters. Like, the priests, they're going to the Madeleine Sisters to investigate some case of possession and blah, blah. But it seems that the Irish culture are meeting other cultures, like in different places, in different settings. So not only in Ireland, because during the Celtic Tiger, the films were mostly based in Ireland and talking about Ireland, Irish lifestyle. But now it seems that they are going to other places in the country to talk about Ireland. I'm sorry, in other places of the planet to talk about Ireland. So we have Papi Chulo, we have Room. It's a very famous film, O Quarto de Jack. It's by an Irish writer, and like I could go on and on about the like. There's one Viva that it was recorded in Cuba, and like there are many stories that it's not immediately related to Ireland, but there is a strong Irish influence on them.
Thank you.
So time is over. So if anybody has any question, please send your questions, and we try to get in touch with the lecturer and send you the answers. All right. So I may conclude by thanking all of you who took part in this warm conversation or warm talk this afternoon. And my heartfelt thanks going out to Professor Cláudio Crow, Laura Iglesias Quadrado, Professor Vitor, who has already left, Gisele, particularly to those who were here today, for the quality of your superb speeches. Also, a big thank you to all my scholars, Lara, Rebeca, Sanio, Santos, Rosilaine, Manuel, Fernando, Glaube, and Lucas, who were by my side all the time, helping me in many ways. They worked so hard to make this virtual Bloomsday a very special one. Thank you all for your continued support, enthusiasm, dedication, and passion. Thank you very much. Hope to see you next year, Cláudio. Cláudio is finishing now. Don't leave, because Cláudio is finishing in good style.
Oh, am I supposed to do that?
I haven't mentioned before, but Cláudio is also a musician. Okay. Yes, as I told in the beginning, before Sanio starts, I met Cláudio at Finnegan's Pub, and he has a band, don't you?
Yes, I do. It's called Fianna. It spells Fianna, which is the name of a mythological group of a war band that defends Ireland, led by none other than Finn McCool. So I think it's an appropriate name for a band playing Irish music here in Brazil.
And the other activity is Cláudio goes to Ireland every year with a group of people who are interested in going to Ireland. And I believe this year you're not able to go, but
alas, we're not going this year.
To do the same, Cláudio. You have to meet your friends or your people online. And
exactly, we've been doing that.
To them.
We've been doing that regularly, so, you know, to brush up my accent and everything. So yeah, I have good friends there, and it's a pity, but it's how it is nowadays, isn't it? I mean, we're not going this year, but it's all set for July 2021. Yeah, we're going there.
So let's listen to you now to close our section, today's section, and to close our Bloomsday in good style.
It is happy Bloomsday to everyone, and I couldn't finish this song without thanking you again, Noélia, and all the people. Gisele, it's been a long time since we last exchanged words. It's always a pleasure to hear you, and you know, I'd like to dedicate this to all the people that are enthusiastically working on behalf of Irish culture, with a song that I mentioned in my presentation, and that's the anthem for the city of Dublin, the unofficial anthem for the city of Dublin, which is Molly Malone. So here we go.
Okay.
In Dublin's first city, where the girls are so pretty, first set me eyes on sweet Molly Malone. She wheeled her wheelbarrow through streets broad and narrow, crying cackles and mussels, alive, alive, oh, alive, alive, oh, oh, alive, alive, oh, oh, cackles and mussels, alive, alive, oh. Alive, alive, oh, oh, alive, alive, oh, oh, cackles and mussels, alive, alive, oh. She was a fishmonger, and for sure was no wonder, for so were her father and mother before. They both filled their barrows through streets broad and narrow, crying cackles and mussels, alive, alive, oh, alive, alive, oh, oh, alive, alive, oh, oh, cackles and mussels, alive, alive, oh. Alive, alive, oh, oh, alive, alive, oh, oh, cackles and mussels, alive, alive, oh. There's a sad ending to the story.
Oh.
She died of a fever and no one could save her. And that was the end of sweet Molly Malone. Never goes will her barrow through streets broad and narrow, crying cackles and mussels, alive, alive, oh, alive, alive, oh, oh, alive, alive, oh, oh, cackles and mussels, alive, alive, oh, alive, alive, oh, oh, alive, alive, oh, oh, cackles and mussels, alive, alive, oh.
Thank
We're on
you.
the Himalayas.
Thank you all.
Thank you so much, Claudia. That was great. Thank you.
Yes,
much.
you see, we're not able to celebrate Bloomsday as we did every year, but it was very good. We did a lot.
Indeed.
I think more than the previous year. The last
Which is
year,
wonderful.
yes, we did 2 days. And this year, 2 weeks celebrating.
Very good. Noélia, as they say in Ireland, bola boss. Congratulations. Very good stuff.
Oh, thank you. Thank you all. Bye-bye. See you next year.
See you. Thanks very much.
Yes,
Thank
let's
you. Thank
let's continue drinking.
Oh, indeed.